Chapter 4, The Professor's Pet. And so we see, Miss P was saying, that the main symbols of the story correspond to the elements of the journey motif proposed by Carl Jung. The class stared at her stunned. Most of them had spent yesterday afternoon and evening and a good part of the night grappling with the first day of seminar homework. They were tired, crabby, and 100% confused about today's lesson. 3 out of the 5 pit people were asleep. "This seminar garbage is for the birds," muttered Mark. "Too bad her hat wasn't connected to her mouth." "No, this is fantastic," Benji insisted, looking around. "No one understands a single word. Perfect. When Professor P sees how far out in left field she is, maybe she'll call off the seminar." "And we can be a class again," added Mark longingly. "Okay," the teacher concluded. "Any questions?" A hand shot up. "Yes, Arthur." Arthur squinted at the board. "I don't understand this." "Excellent," Ms. P approved. "In a seminar like ours, if you don't understand something, please don't be embarrassed to ask about it." She beamed. "Now, Arthur, what part of the lesson are you having problems with?" "All of it," Arthur admitted. She frowned. "Well, exactly where did you begin to lose my train of thought?" "Right after you said good morning," he replied, blushing. There were a few chuckles and the occasional mumbled, "Me too." One of the awake people in the pit whistled a few bars of "For He's a Jolly Good Fellow." Ms. P looked shaken. Can anybody tell me what I've been talking about for the last hour?" "Ha!" whispered Benji in the uncomfortable silence that followed. "Nobody could have understood that stuff." A hand went up directly in front of him. "Ellen!" chorused Benji and Mark in horror. "Nice going, Havermeyer," said Benji. "Next time, try to keep your big mouth shut." He and Mark were sitting in the hall after Miss P had ejected them for disturbing the class. "Me?" exclaimed Mark. "You yelled Ellen too, remember?" "But I yelled it softly," insisted Benji. "If you'd kept quiet, Professor P probably wouldn't even have heard me. Besides, we would have gotten away with it if you hadn't batted her hat out of the ballpark yesterday." "Do you think Ellen's going to be the new teacher's pet?" asked Mark. "Professor's pet," Benji amended. "Teacher's pets only come in classes. In seminars, you get professor's pets. I can't believe what a traitor she is. We should kick her off the show, except that her dad runs the station." "Come on, she's not that bad." "We had the professor on the ropes," argued Benji. "She was going to have to admit that her seminar was too hard. Who knows? She might even have bumped us back down to being a class. But no, Ellen had to show everybody how smart she is and announce that she understood everything." At that moment, the door to the classroom opened, and Ellen Louise stepped out into the hall. "Are you guys still here?" "Where would we be?" snarled Benji. "After all, we've got nothing better to do than sit around out here, falling even further behind in that idiot seminar, so we'll have even less time to get ready for Saturday." "Well, Ms. P says you can come back in now, if you promise to behave." Mark was horrified. "She's got you doing her dirty work?" "Come on," said Ellen Louise patiently. "Quit being so stubborn. Ms. P is a great teacher. We finally found someone who will stop boring our heads off and get us into some interesting and exciting work." "I like having my head bored off," said Benji stoutly, "because afterwards you can pick up your head and go work on the show." With a sigh, Mark placed his hand on Benji's shoulder. "We may as well go in. The more we miss, the more we have to make up." The two returned to class, shamefaced. The standing ovation they received from the pit was deafening. Mark could not resist taking a bow. This was a mistake. "All right, you two," said Miss P sternly. "That's it. You're on detention for the rest of the day." Benji was horrified. But today's the day we meet with the people on the Kids View. sign-up sheet and slot them into the show. You should have thought of that before you disrupted the seminar twice, said the teacher. You're on detention. Benji let a "but I didn't do anything" die on his tongue. He certainly didn't want her to think back to his lecture on politeness in the parking lot yesterday. She might remember what had happened right after it. Later that day, he sat in unparalleled misery, serving his sentence, while Ellen Louise conducted all the Kids View interviews herself. Knowing Ellen, whispered Mark, his fellow sufferer, she'll probably schedule 45 minutes of the big yawn. For Benji, not being in touch with Kids View was brutal torture. Shut up, Havermeyer. This is all your fault. By 3:20 Friday afternoon, Benji was bouncing up and down at his desk. Both eyes were riveted on the minute hand of the clock as it headed down the home stretch. The last 10 minutes before 3:30 dismissal. Everyone was restless, looking forward to a whole weekend away from 5th grade seminar. The sounds from the pit were like the rising roar of the crowd in the last few seconds of the national anthem before the Super Bowl. As soon as the big hand hits the 6, announced Benji, I am out this door and home. If I work straight through the rest of today, I should have my script ready for the show tomorrow. Benji still had the better part of a week's work ahead of him. He had not written a word of his script since Monday, Miss Gucci's disappearance day. Ellen Louise had set up the order of the show, segment by segment, but the host script was Benji's job. I'm almost afraid to say it, Benji whispered, but I think we lived through this nightmare week. Mark laughed. Don't jinx yourself. Benji smiled. There are only 8 minutes of school left. Even the professor couldn't. He stopped short and stared. Ms. P had produced a huge stack of ditto sheets and was passing them around the room. This is your independent research assignment, she declared proudly. Students these days don't know where and how to look for knowledge. That's why every Friday in this seminar, you'll be given a variety of questions to answer by Monday. A low gurgling noise came from the pit. Benji took one look at the sheet that had been placed on his desk. For a second, he forgot how to breathe and just sat there, wheezing and gasping. These are short answer questions on all different subjects, beamed the teacher. I think you'll enjoy them. They're a random assortment, a potpourri. You will get the answers any way you can. It's a test of your ingenuity and creative thinking. You see? Don't freak out, whispered Mark to Benji, who was turning an unhealthy shade of purple. Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. In, out, in, out. Even Ellen Louise noticed Benji's condition. Mark's right, she counseled. Give it a little time. You'll calm down. But Benji did not calm down. All the way home, he bemoaned the new assignment. This is it. I'm doomed. There'll be no Kids View tomorrow. The host will be working on something far more important. He slapped the ditto violently and stared at it with hatred and loathing. This! Why can't you do the research assignment on Sunday? Asked Ellen Louise. Because that's the day my whole family visits my grandparents, Benji replied. Rain or shine, no getting out of it. He grasped at his hair. I can't do the show without a script. And to get a script, I have to take a 0 on the research thing. I'm dead. Soap opera time, said Ellen Louise sarcastically. Come on, Benji, don't be so dramatic. It's not such a big deal. You've got the rest of Saturday after Kids View, and probably some of Sunday night. And if you're not quite done, I'll help you with the rest on Monday morning. Does that go for me too? Asked Mark hopefully. I was planning to get in a little recreation this weekend, like sleep. It's not so easy, Ellen, exclaimed Benji. Forget all our other homework. There are 10 questions on here, and they're real hard ones too. Just look at number 1. What's the longest river in South America? How are we supposed to know? I can't believe you guys, said Ellen Louise with conviction. These questions aren't even really work. They're a game, like Trivial Pursuit or a TV quiz show. Most people love stuff like that. Suddenly, Benji threw his hands up into the air, sending his notebooks flying. A quiz show, he exclaimed, his face lighting up like a Christmas tree. We could put one on Kids View, a weekly trivia quiz segment. Are you nuts? Asked Mark. We don't have the time to do our homework, let alone make up a bunch of trivia questions. Benji smiled for the first time since he'd spotted the stack of dittos in Ms. P's hand. We don't need to make up anything. He picked up the assignment sheet lying on the ground at his feet and cradled it lovingly. We've got 10 top-notch questions right here. But Miss P would never give us permission to use these, Ellen Louise protested. They're homework. She probably wouldn't, Benji agreed. But if we don't ask her, she can't say no. A slow smile was forming on Mark's lips. It grew and grew until it practically split his face. I get it. We announced that we're having a trivia quiz, and we read out the questions on the air, then people phone up with the answers, we write them down, and hand them in on Monday. We do Kids View and our homework at the same time, chortled Benji. Ellen Louise was horrified. But that's cheating. It is not, said Benji righteously. Professor P said we should get our answers any way we can. She wants creative thinking? Well, here it is. Right, Mark? Right, Mark confirmed. We're not just learning. We're learning about learning. We've already learned that the best way to learn the answers is to get people to phone up and tell them to us. He gave Ellen Louise his best solemn and serious look. That's what being part of a seminar is all about. She hesitated. Well, I guess so, but there's only one problem, Mark interrupted. If we're going to have a quiz show, we'll need prizes. Who's going to phone up if you can't win anything? Good point, said Benji thoughtfully. Then he snapped his fingers. Mr. Whitehead, maybe he can give us some. Mr. Whitehead, Mark exploded. He wouldn't give us the skin off a grape. He's our sponsor. He wants the show to do well as much as we do. Surely he can part with some little things for us to use as prizes. You know, goldfish, guppies, that kind of stuff. Why don't you go over there and tell him our idea? Me? He hates my guts. If I show up at our annual Friends without you guys for protection, he'll feed me to the gerbils. Why don't you go? We have scripts to finish, Benji explained patiently. Just stick close to Mrs. Whitehead, and you'll be okay. Are you sure about this, Benji? Asked Ellen Louise dubiously. Of course I'm sure. It's for the show. Now, let's get going. Benji was seated at his desk, slaving over his script, when his baby sister crawled into the room and deposited herself on her tiny stool. No practice tonight, kid, said Benji. You may not know it, but your brother's half an hour away from pulling off the biggest miracle in radio since Eldridge Kestenbaum interviewed the runner-up in the Clinton County Flower Show and got stung by 19 bees, but managed to carry on his live interview. I'm going to be ready for Kids View tomorrow, in spite of Professor P. Aaron propped her chin on his desk and looked impressed. The phone rang, and Benji raced into the hall to answer it. It was Mark. Hi, how's the script coming? Great, Benji enthused. I'm almost finished. How about Mr. Whitehead? Not bad, replied Mark. I mean, he pitched a fit at first, and he called me a lowlife and accused me of trying to put him in the poorhouse, but when I told him about the quiz show, he thought it was a good idea. So he's supplying the prizes? Asked Benji. All 10, said Mark. We just have to write down the names of the winners, and they'll be able to pick up their prizes at our animal friends. You know, Benji, now I understand why I hang out with you. You're a genius. This plan might just get us through 5th grade seminar. Benji hung up and danced around the house, punching at the air in triumph. He was interrupted by clapping and turned to see Aaron in his doorway, giving him a standing ovation.